Okay, hello, it's Paul Green here from the business community with another one of our regular Spotlight on interviews where we delve into the business life of various people. And today I'm joined by Stephen Church from Copywriter Pro. Hello,
Hello,
Stephen.
Paul. Hi, thanks for having me along.
That's all right. Thanks for coming along. So before we probe you, as it were, perhaps you'd like to give an introduction for those people out there that don't know who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, what a great opportunity. Thank you. Well, I suppose I'll begin with my bog standard networking pitch, which you've heard about 5,053 times.
At
My
least.
name is Stephen Church. I'm what they call an SEO copywriter, and that means I get businesses more and better clients by writing words for their websites which are clear, concise, and compelling. But my work is about a lot more than just web copy. I write anything where words are required for business. So it could be sales letters, emails, newsletter campaigns, press releases, case studies, white papers, tender documents, anything where words are involved. Even if you want to write a note to the milkman to tell him to stop sleeping with your wife, that's something I can do for you. Mhm.
And everyone will be clear, concise, and compelling, won't it, Stephen?
Let's hope so.
Okay, so tell us. So, what we're going to do, ask you a few questions, find out a little bit about your business journey. You're kindly going to share some top tips from your vast knowledge. But first of all, why don't you just sort of tell us how did you end up being a copywriter? What's your business journey?
Goodness, yeah. Well, that's a dangerous question to ask because you know me quite well, and you know that I tend to bang on and on and on. And being so terribly elderly, I've got about 66 years to tell you about. But I'll try and keep it down to 3.5 hours if that's what you prefer.
Yeah, fabulous.
Um, okay. Well, I loved English at school, did quite well at it. And my first job was as an English language teacher working overseas. I worked in exotic locations such as Spain, Iran, Afghanistan. I was there 50 years ago when it all kicked off for the very first time, and in Saudi Arabia, where I got married. Um, and then, so that was working as an English language teacher. And I always loved English. I love the way it works. I love the way words move people, how words affect how people think and how they act. But then I took a brief break from words and language, about a 30-year break actually, where I joined the family retail business here in Northampton. That had been going for nearly 150 years. And in many ways, it was great fun. We sold china and crystal and cookware and collectibles, and we had 6 shops at one point. It was successful for a good number of years. Then, for all kinds of reasons, many of which you and the people who watching now will understand. The business just declined. It was a 15-year long, slow, painful decline where the high street became less and less of a destination to go to. The category we were in became less and less popular. For all kinds of reasons, the business very slowly and painfully dried up. We were, and this bit does link to copywriting, we were ahead of the game in some ways. We had a website as early as 1996, which is pretty early. I think it was probably clockwork driven. It was so ancient, that website. Um, but I got interested in the internet. I got interested in the power of the internet and of course writing words for it. Then in 2005, we set up our very first e-commerce site, so proper online shopping, and we called it the UK Gift Company. And that was something I set up myself. And again, words and copywriting became more and more important, and also a knowledge of search engine optimization and Google AdWords. And this was all a fascinating learning curve for me. But sadly, the great successes we had online weren't sufficient to save the business. So in 2012, early 2012, it packed up. And it was very distressing. But I thought this was a chance to do something I'd always hankered after doing, and that was to work with words. So I set up Copywriter Pro in, I think, 2013. And it's been a fantastic journey. I've loved almost every minute of it, probably because I'm extremely fortunate. I've had a very cushy middle class upbringing with everything on a plate, including the family business. And I've always admired people who haven't had the privileged start to life that I've had. And I've admired how so many of them have got on by themselves, set up in business by themselves, made a success of it by themselves. So Copywriter Pro has given me the opportunity to do the same kind of thing. And I feel very fortunate that it has been a success. I'm busier than I ever thought was possible. And that brings us to 2021. LinkedIn told me the other day that I've been going 9 years. So thank you, LinkedIn. And so there we are, Paul. How was that for the journey?
That wasn't too bad. But I also know if you weren't busy enough as a copywriter, you're also a celebrant. So
Oh, yes.
tell me a little bit about how that came into the mix and what took you down that path.
Okay. A celebrant. Well, that's my dodgy little sideline, if you like. Yes, I conduct funerals. And this is something that struck me as something I'd like to do about 5 years ago. If it's not an oxymoron, I'm a devout humanist, which means I'm an atheist. And there's a demand, an increasing demand for funerals without any faith involved. So because of this demand, it's something I thought I'd like to do. There's also an altruistic element to it, because when a family lose a person, they are obviously in a state of distress, and there's an element of helping them through the grieving process. So you pay them a visit, you find out about the life of the deceased, you find out about the kind of funeral that the family want, and in a way you're helping them through the important grieving process. And it's something that's increasingly in demand. And the funerals might take place at a crematorium or at an open burial ground, almost anywhere except in a church, oddly enough.
Mm-hmm. And what had you jump into that as at the time?
Well, I heard from the humanist organisation called Humanist UK that they were looking for people to take on to train up, and so I did the training. Interestingly, there's of course a link with copywriting, because you have to write the
Mm-hmm.
funeral tribute. You have to write it in a way that's sensitive and appropriate, and so there's a definite link to the art of copywriting, and it's a nice link, and it's something I'm very happy doing. I do about 2 or 3 funerals a month.
Okay. Keeps you on your toes then. So
Absolutely.
I ask people on these calls. I'm not on these calls. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with Simon Sinek. Start with why. I'm sure you are. And so I'm interested to know, if you like, what your why is. What's your driving force? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What's your motivator?
Yes, it's a very good question. I've got the book up here on my bookshelf. I've even read part of it at least. So there we go. That's a start. A lot of people begin when they answer that question, they say, my why is that I want to help people, ... I'm not sure. I think it might be disingenuous if I would use that as a reason. Helping people is nice. Helping people, if it works, is nice for them, and it makes me feel good. So that's if you like, a nice healthy byproduct. But when I get up in the morning, I do rub my hands with glee and say, oh yes, another day of copywriting. What's it going to be today? So my why is certainly to be useful to businesses and to individuals. My why is certainly to give me something to do, because I'm way too young to even consider retirement, way too broke as well. And my why is to be productive and to enjoy life, making use of a skill that I believe I have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if Simon Sinek would agree with any of those, but that's honest. And I am determined to enjoy life, and I do enjoy it. I love so many aspects of copywriting. I wish I'd done it for 50 years and not just 9.
Oh, well, you're doing it now. That's the main thing. So you've got competitors out there, Stephen. There's other writers, and it's sort of the thing that
How
people,
dare you bring that up this
it's
interview?
outrageous, isn't it?
I thought I was the only one.
And I guess to insult you even more, I guess anybody could wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm going to start writing for businesses now." So, what makes you different from your competitors? Why do you stand out, would you say?
Okay, this is the bit, one of many bits where I feel quite uncomfortable, because it's important not to come across as arrogant. You're quite right. A lot of people, and I hear about them all the time, talk about going into copywriting, and I've actually helped some. One or two of them you know well.
Mhm.
And when people approach me saying, "Oh, I fancy being a copywriter, any tips?" then I do try and help them. I have them round here for an hour or two to recommend some reading material to help them kickstart their businesses. And there are a lot of people. One of the reasons is that as you'll be aware, journalism isn't what it was. Newspapers and the whole news sector has reduced dramatically. So there are a lot of journalists who are out of work, and they like to become copywriters, and many of them make very good copywriters. A lot of people I've spoken to are very young. They come straight out of college or university, and they might have done a journalism course and found out, surprise, surprise, there are not many jobs for us anymore. So they think, "Oh, I'll become a copywriter." But it's something that's very difficult to do, I believe, without lots and lots of training. And I think this it might seem a strange thing to say. I think the best copywriters are probably fairly elderly. Or if they're not fairly elderly, then they've spent a lifetime of reading. I'm convinced of the fact that the best way to write well is to read well, and to read plenty. And I spent a lifetime of doing exactly that. And I think that gives me a massive breadth of experience and a great feel for the language. And a lot of it is to do with feel. You've heard me quote this lots of times. The late, great poet, activist, actress Maya Angelou very famously said, "People may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel."
Mhm.
And this, to me, is my copywriting mantra. My job as a copywriter is to make the reader feel that they want to click here, or make a phone call there, or send an email inquiry there. It's all about using words to make people feel. And I believe it's very difficult to do this unless you're very well read. I'm sure there will be all kinds of people who disagree with this, and they're welcome to, and they may be right. And there will, of course, be exceptions. But I've spoken from here, in this room here, in my office here, I've spoken to young people who fancy the idea of becoming a copywriter. So we chat about it. And one of the first questions I ask them is, "So tell me, what are you actually reading at the moment?" And they might tell me, or sometimes they might say, "Well, nothing much." I had a young lad in a couple of years ago, and I asked him what he'd been reading. He says, "Well, I don't really read much." Well, I said, "What was the last thing you read?" And he said, "Alex Ferguson's autobiography." Now, that's fine. Nothing wrong with Alex Ferguson's autobiography. I've read that too. But you cannot get a feel for language. You cannot learn to use language without exposing yourself to it in as many ways as possible. And that means doing lots of reading, not just business books, of course, but fiction and biographies. In fact, I've got a thing. Can I tell you about can I do a little rant on business books? Or
Well,
is
I
now
just,
not?
I just wanted to make a joke first about you exposing yourself. So now we've done that.
Did you?
You can now move on.
Lovely. I was trying to keep this clean, and now you've ruined everything. Yeah. Oh, I've been talking to one or two people about business books recently. And yes, business books are great. They're sometimes essential. They're sometimes nonsense. And you can read them or you can listen to them. But I think I think what I've got to, I've been reading too many business books recently, and some of them have been really good. But there's a vacuum in my life at the moment. I'm not reading any fiction. And I think fiction's really good. I think it's good for us all. I think fiction takes you on a trip of imagination. It's like taking some nice, friendly, mind-enhancing drugs. Um, Fiction takes you away from the current day, from your woes, from your trials and tribulations. It takes you away from work. It takes you away from business. And I've now amended my list of business books to read. And between each business book, I've inserted a work of fiction, which I shall read, because I think that by reading fiction, by taking yourself away from the day-to-day humdrum, the treadmill of business, I think fiction gives you a lift and improves you all round. End of rant.
That wasn't too bad, Stephen. I only tend to read business books, and that's only in the last couple of years when I started a business book club. I'm now part of one, just to get me to do it, really. And I don't read much fiction because I just work on the basis if the book's that good, they'll make it into a film eventually, and I'll just watch that. So we've sort of touched on it already, but I thought I'd just sort of like poke the bear a little bit. So, I can create a website. I did English at school, didn't do too bad. I can put some words on a website. So what's the point of, why would I need a copywriter?
Well, that's a very good question. And of course, all your questions are good. But I think you're planning to ask me what one of my biggest challenges as a copywriter. And that really links into it. I think the biggest challenge for copywriters is convincing the world that there's a need for copywriters. And I think this probably applies to copywriting more than any other profession or trade you can think of. And that is that so many people think they can do it. And they've got good reason to think so, because everybody, and by everybody, I mean 100% of the able-minded native English-speaking world, 100% of them did English at school, everybody. And a lot of people were very good at it. A lot of people enjoyed English. A lot of people had a lot of affection for their English teacher. And they've gone on to get good qualifications, GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, and beyond. And because they were good at it and because they liked it, they think that they can write good copy. I've yet to come across an English GCSE or A-level course where effective business copywriting is part of that course. But there's a world of difference between studying literature, studying language, and writing words that work for business, writing words that will change people's minds. And so this is the problem that copywriters have. I mean, at least, everybody has the name of a plumber in their phone. And plumbing is great. In fact, I sometimes think I should become a plumber, apart from the fact that I don't know the difference between a screwdriver and a spanner. Because plumbing is straightforward. You're in the client's phone, they've got a leaking tap, they call you, you pop round, you mend the leaking tap, and straight away they can see that what you've done has worked or not, as the case may be, and off you go to the next customer. Copywriting is completely different. I would suggest that the vast majority of people don't have a copywriter's phone number in their phone. They think that if they need a bit of writing doing, whether it's a sales letter or a LinkedIn profile or a web page, they think, well, I did well at English at school, I can do this perfectly well myself. And the other problem is that with a plumber, it's easy to see once they've gone whether they've done the job or not. With copyright, it's not so straightforward. I could hopefully write the most wonderful web copy, really engaging, but it'll take time. It's not overnight for the impact of that to be seen. And of course, you can, if you're diligent, you know your way around Google Analytics, you can find out whether the degree of engagement has improved as a result of that copywriting. But the result of the work of a copywriter are often not instant. They're sometimes difficult to assess. It can be purely subjective. You can just say, oh, well, I like the look of and sound of my website now. It just feels better. So the biggest challenge for copywriters is convincing the whole world out there that they have a role to play. I forgot what your question was.
Well, so have I, Stephen. No, I do try and channel you when I'm writing stuff. So, you know, breaking up the masses of text with bullet points or headlines, thinking of a good title if it's a blog post or something like that to get people to write. Sometimes putting stuff in bold or italics or whatever just to highlight that. So having calls to action, etc., etc. And also, you know, being conscious of not using long and complex or jargony words. And I don't know what it is, you know, whether you say, you know, write it so an eight-year-old can understand it or a child can understand it. You know, you don't need to use these massively big words just to get the.
But you've just given away my entire raft of copywriting tips, and so now nobody will ever hire me again. The secrets are all out there.
I'm sure it's not. And you know, I have to say, I have used your services to turn in, you know, what was a bland sort of homepage to something that is a little bit more compelling, and it is very noticeable. You know, from what I thought was okay, you know, you'll take it and you will transform it into something that is obviously more engaging than, you know, whatever I or someone else was to write. So, you know, that to me does. Justify you know, using a service like you.
Thank you, and I believe you paid me too, so that was nice as well.
Yeah, that was yeah, for some reason I don't know why. So I'm going to ask you for another tip before you just sort of give your formal ones. That there's a tool in Word that I know you've mentioned before that's a little bit hidden for the uninitiated, which is quite a good tool if you're trying to write something that is compelling. Do you want to let people know what that is called and how to find it?
Yes, it's a readability tool, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history here. It's called the Flesch-Kincaid readability test, and we've all got it in Microsoft Word, but by default I believe it's switched off. So you need to go into what they used to call spell check, but I think the latest versions of Word call it editor, and it's within there. And the Flesch-Kincaid reading test was founded in the early 1960s. The US Navy developed a training manual which they realized was virtually incomprehensible, and they wanted it to be rewritten in a way that their young naval cadets could easily understand and take in. So they contacted these two fellas who were psycholinguists, and knew all about language and words and how easy they are to absorb and the mental processes of absorbing language. And these two professors were called Flesch and Kincaid, and they developed this system where you take a piece of text and you can judge how readable it is. And when you put your piece of copy through the Flesch-Kincaid readability test on Microsoft Word, you get points scored, and you get points for readability. And the most interesting part for me is the readability score, which is a number usually between 5 and 15. And the score that your piece of text earns is the American high school grade that could understand what you've written. So you want that score to be as low as possible. So if your piece of text scores 14, that's actually way too high. It means it couldn't be understood by anybody under the age of 14. Whereas if your readability score is 7 or 8, that's very good because it can be understood by a youngish child. And the Flesch-Kincaid readability test also scores you for a number of other aspects of your copywriting, including whether you've used too much of the passive voice rather than the active voice, but that all gets a bit technical. But it's certainly well worth switching on in Word and making use of it, because it makes a big difference. It also looks at the length of your sentences, the length of your words, the length of your paragraphs, and it gives you an overall score. But again, keep it between you and me, Paul, because that's my job as a copywriter to make
Yeah,
those
we don't
choices.
want everybody to know that your tool's the trade, do we, Stephen?
Absolutely.
So you did mention, obviously, because you know one of the questions was the what's your biggest challenge, outside of the overcoming, I can write English, so why do I need a copywriter? From a business perspective, in the decade or so that you've been doing this, what would you say has been your biggest business challenge?
I'm trying to think, because really, okay, just because it's a challenge doesn't mean that it's not been possible to overcome.
Oh, no,
I
sure.
suppose my biggest challenge was the one which I lost sleep over at the very beginning, and have periodically since. And it's a challenge that I should think almost everybody who steps into the big bad world of freelancing, it's a challenge that almost everybody has to overcome. And that is, how am I going to get customers? Well, actually, there are two. How am I going to get customers? And surely I'm not good enough. That dreaded imposter syndrome, which I think I've suffered from for years and years, certainly since I set up as a copywriter. How can anybody take me on as a copywriter when I was a shopkeeper for 30 years? I've never done a marketing qualification. I've got no qualifications whatever. I'm entirely self-taught. How will anybody, why should anybody take me on? But they do take me on, and I think they take me on because of word of mouth. Um, I do lots of networking. We'll come to that in a minute. And I've got a website which is effective, and I'm very active on LinkedIn. So people do take me on, and they seem to like what I do. I'm lucky enough to have over 50 gold star reviews on Google My Business, and over something like 50 positive recommendations on LinkedIn. So imposter syndrome is one challenge, and it raises its ugly head a few times still.
Mhm.
And the other one was simply, how on earth am I going to get business from scratch? Um, and I'm sure everybody suffers from that. And the way I got business from scratch was very simply through networking. Um, Networking has been an absolute joy for the last 9 years. I never believed it existed when I was working um, as a shopkeeper doing all kinds of retail. I didn't know networking was a thing. I thought, that people just carried on businesses and got new customers through advertising and what have you. But networking has been wonderful. I've learned so much from the supportive nature of my fellow networkers. As I've told you many times, Paul, I've got had so much pleasure from the business community and all that it brings. It's not just getting business from networking, which I do, but it's learning from the expertise and generosity of other members of the groups.
Mhm.
And it's also simply building friendships. I'm not sure I had many friends at all before I started networking. Um, I kid myself, I've got quite a few now. And it has all been down to the joys of networking. And you really get to know people well if you're consistent. And consistency is the key. You have to, as Woody Allen says, you have to turn up. And if you keep turning up and keep on supporting others in the networking group you attend, the business comes, the support comes, but most of all, the friendship comes too.
Checks in the post, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Good.
So Russell was tuning in when you were giving Russell Parker was tuning in when you're giving us top tips. So there you go. So he'll be stealing that now and using it in his.
Absolutely. That's
his
another potential client out of the window. There we go.
yeah. No worries, Stephen. I bet you're glad you came onto this now. So you've kindly agreed to share some top tips from your vast knowledge. So I'm going to put you in solo mode and just basically hand over the floor to you. So there you go. The floor is yours, Stephen.
Okay, well, 3 top copywriting tips. Probably the biggest tip of all, tip number 1, is write in a way that's conversational. Don't be formal, don't be officious. Write to your audience as though you're sitting with them at the kitchen table over a cup of coffee. What does that mean? That means using contractions, not writing we will or you have or they will not, but it's we'll, you've, and they won't. Using contractions, some people hesitate to do it. They weren't allowed to use contractions at school. It's sloppy English. It's too informal. Well, it isn't. Copywriting good copywriting is copywriting that does the job. And writing in a conversational way has been proved time and time again to do the job. Write as though you're chatting with a friend. And that will simply make your writing much more engaging and effective than it otherwise would be. Tip number 2, keep it brief. Not my finest quality. Those who know me well tell me I'm inclined to bang on and on and on. But in your copywriting, you must keep it brief. Be rigorous, be unrelenting, be brutal about cutting out unnecessary words. I could have said then cutting out those unnecessary words. Didn't need the word those, so cutting out unnecessary words. Look at your copy time and time again, and I guarantee you'll be able to cut it right back. If you don't believe me, send me on LinkedIn the opening paragraph of your website or the opening few lines for your LinkedIn profile. Send them to me, and when I get a moment, I guarantee you I can make them make the words briefer. So keeping it brief, really important. You have to remember the people who read your stuff, they're busy, they got loads of stuff to do, so you've got to make it easy for them to engage with you by keeping it brief. And third copywriting tip is think about who you're writing to. Who's it for? How often have you looked at a website and the very first word is I or we? We've been established for 45 years. We offer this service, we offer that service. We will do this, we'll achieve that. We have a great history, etc., etc., etc. Well, take it from me, your readers really don't give a monkeys about you and what you've achieved. Your reader wants to know what you will do for them. Your reader wants to know that you're interested in them. So look at the word count on your website. How many we's and I's are there compared to you and your? Use the words you and your far more often than you're doing at the moment, because then your reader will know you're writing to them, about them, and for. There we go. That was 3 tips. Is that okay?
Perfect, Stephen. Thank you very much. People do have a tendency to wheel over their copy, don't they, Stephen?
Well, they certainly do. Yes.
Somebody the other day invited me to review their website, and I'm not an expert, but funny enough, I'd given some feedback on a website in the particular call. So this guy obviously appreciated what I said, and so I went and looked at theirs, and there was a lot of we on that, we this, we that. We've been doing this for ages. So I just sort of gave them suggested words. It wouldn't have been obviously to your standard, but I just sort of said, generally get away from the we this and I that, because exactly as you said, you need to talk to your audience, don't you?
You of course pointed them in my direction.
Funny enough, I haven't yet, which is absolutely outrageous of me.
Not very good networking, Paul.
I know. It's a piss poor performance, Stephen. I do apologise, but no, I'll keep an eye on them, and if they're struggling, I will send them back to you, because it was one of these things where I don't think a homepage needs to be too scrolly. If people have done about 2 scrolls, I think you need some sort of call to action to take them somewhere else.
Yeah. If I could butt in there very briefly, the thing they're getting on a web page, what's called above the fold. It's called above the fold because in the old days of when people used to send out lots of mail shots, when you take a piece of paper out of an envelope, there's a fold, and you need to get all the important information above that fold before they've even started to unfold the leaflet. So above the fold on a website is the bit before you start scrolling down, and the key thing there is not to say anything about your mission statement or about how long you've been established, or even necessarily about the features of the service that you provide. You need to get in right at the very top, the benefits. You need to get across to people the moment they've clapped eyes on your home page how by dealing with you, their lives will be improved. And so you need to get those benefits in at the very, very top.
Yeah, I think this particular website, it had a headline which didn't really tell me what they did unless you knew. Then then there was a couple of sentences which was very wee and also used some jargon in it, which I didn't understand what that meant. And then there was like a call to action, almost like saying "buy us now." And I thought you've created no value, you've created no benefits, you've not told me what I'm buying. And so I said to them, my guess is nobody clicks this particular call to action because it's, I guess they tried to get it in the first fold, but it was far too early because they'd not sold on this particular website, which I know a lot of people do. Most of the first fold was a picture. Very nice picture with some writing over it, but of course that takes up a lot of space that you could be using to sort of put those things across. So I think you've got to get that balance between pretty and converting, haven't you, at the end of the day?
Absolutely right. Yeah, but those words that appear on the at the very top of a site, the words on the banner, they can certainly identify a benefit.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Then there was another random photo in the middle of this scrolling. I thought, well, it's a nice photo, but it has absolutely no relevance to it. So it's like, get rid of the photo. I might forward you my email to them so you can take a look and sort of see whether my advice was appropriate or not, should you wish. So anyway, one last thing, Stephen, because I know you're
Yes.
a busy boy and you've got a lot of things to juggle. If you were to give one top tip for any small business owner out there, given your experience as a small business owner, what would that top tip be?
Don't leave it too long to outsource. We all know that starting up a business is incredibly hard work. You have to burn the midnight oil. You often, if you don't have any capital, you often have to do everything yourself. The problem you have is that as success builds, you can make the mistake of thinking, oh, I'm becoming successful. It's because I'm working all these hours I've become successful. Well, you have to have a work-life balance. So when you can, start to outsource and make sure that you give yourself time to focus on what you're best at in your business and to focus on proper everyday life as well. And the best way to outsource is to go networking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true story. True story. Thank you very much, Stephen, for your time. I think we'll end the broadcast there so you can crack on with your day. And
Thank you.
really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Enjoyed it very much. Bye.